So we're going to round out today with just a little bit of a discussion about what does it mean to overcome adversity and what is it like when you face these difficult situations and what works and how does it work. And so I just was going to do just a little quick review, a discussion about Whistleblowers of America. Mostly what we do is a peer support program. And the reason we started this as a peer support program is because we recognized that peer support is an active or key ingredient in helping people heal. And when we do that and we build community, that high tide that raises all ships helps us all work together and be stronger together. So I think that just to take a moment and give some definition to what is peer support. So it has several skills. It's a trained professional approach. It's evidence-based. It's trauma-informed. I mean, all of these things are really important when we think about what constitutes an intervention. So things like being non-judgmental. You know, we don't compare and judge each other's cases. My case isn't better than yours, and my trauma isn't worse than yours. And we see that mistake a lot among people who just haven't had that experience and exposure to peer support, is that we don't try to outbid each other or outdo each other. Oh, mine was worse. We're all trying to learn and share experiences. So for me, that was like one of the first things I learned from a peer when I made a connection was, you know, what are these jurisdiction issues? So the first time I filed, she had told me they're going to file a motion to dismiss because of your jurisdictional issue. Just produce your IRA, your individual right to appeal, and you'll be fine. And because of her coaching, as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, she was right, and I was ready. And so, you know, they hit me, I hit them back, but I wouldn't have known to do that because I was pro se. I didn't have an attorney, much against the advice you heard this morning. I didn't even know I needed an attorney. That's how naive I was. Like, nobody told me. So when I thought OSC was my attorney. So in the beginning, I didn't even think I needed one. So I was doing all this stuff pretty much by myself. And it was that, like, having somebody who could guide me, who could mirror for me, who could share her experience and help me get through that initial piece of my case that made me realize that these skills really were important. So it was that being non-judgmental, being able to reflect, this is what I'm hearing, these are the decisions you need to make. Very often, and again, against better legal advice, most people don't think they need an attorney until it comes to settlement. And then they'll call me up in a panic. Oh, they say they want to settle. And I'm like, great, what did you ask for? I don't know. I don't know what to ask for. What do I ask for? And they haven't even had that chance to know what the end game looks like. What do they really want from winning their case? So it's just having that ability to make decisions and have somebody reflect back to you what your thought process is, what are your decision points, and then are you being resilient? I think when Christian and I were doing some of this early on, and we started, so how are you doing? Like, how is your family? Like, what did they think about all of this? And we were starting to get some feedback on some of that made us realize we needed to do more with family issues as well. But it's just helping people think through the other parts of their case. It's letting them vent and letting them feel validated. Somebody once said the most important thing anybody ever said to me as a whistleblower was, I believe you. Because nobody, until they met another whistleblower, believed them. And it's that lived shared experience that I think really matters and starts to make a difference and helps people heal. So I want us to focus a little bit on this panel about some of those elements, and then we're going to close with Mildred really talking about what it means to overcome adversity. I'm going to ask Francesca to go next, because I think some of the work that they've done with moral injury and the connections they've seen within just the military and military whistleblowers has been really important.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate being a member of the panel with this august group. So for those of you who do not know me, I'm Francesca Graham. I recently retired from the Army 112 days ago now. Retired from the Army. I was a whistleblower. I got reprised against, and after being reprised against, I realized my career was over. And so I decided to retire, and I'm now the Chief Operations Officer and Chief Advisor for the Walk the Talk Foundation. So I think what Jackie wanted me to ramble on a little bit is just with some of our work that we do with the Walk the Talk Foundation. So we've been in existence for almost 3 years, and we have spoken with just under 400 uniformed service members, either currently serving or previously serving, as well as some government civilians, both from the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security, primarily the Department of Defense. And one of the things that we have seen over and over again with every single one of these cases is a very deep sense of betrayal, and a very deep sense of isolation for each of the people who were enduring the reprisal or retaliation, whatever it was. Or even if it wasn't even reprisal or retaliation, there's a gentleman up in New York that I'm helping right now who he was not reprised against, he was not retaliated against, but the system within the administrative processes and system within the military that started an investigation on him, not really, found him guilty of it within 4 days, and then told him he was under investigation at the point that they were telling him he was guilty of it. And then he said, "Can I have an investigation?" Investigation did occur. It was unsubstantiated, but the commander said he did not find his own investigation compelling. You're still wrong. You're still pulled off the brigadier general list. You still have bad paperwork in your record, all of these things. So there's this very deep sense of betrayal of the values that we in the military are told that matter: duty on our country, run faster than everyone else, put yourself out there in a way that could lead to your death, or worse than death for many people is being handicapped permanently for the rest of your life. Not worse for the family, certainly. We want the relative there, but a lot of service members, it's worse than death, being handicapped for the rest of your life. And so there's this very real sense of giving of yourself and giving of your future, where the joke is, what are you worried about? You're already dead. Just go ahead and do it, because you've already put yourself into that mental state where you're not worried about that. Because if you're worried about death, if you're worried about all these other things, then it would be very difficult to do some of the work that we do. But part of that social contract, as it were, of being in the military is that you believe you have this trust that the people that are in positions of authority over you, and that's very real in the very strict hierarchical structure that is the military. You believe that these people in positions of authority over you, that they have your back, regardless of whatever it is. And if you screw up, you get punished. Who cares? You keep going on. But if you did not screw up and you were trying to do the right thing, and they turn their back on you, and they not only turn their back on you, but throw knives at you while you're walking away, it makes it a little bit difficult. And you feel this very deep sense of institutional betrayal. And we've noticed that across all of our cases, big reason I think being that people in the military very much identify themselves with their service. I know there's at least 2 Marines in the room. And if I called you ex-Marines, you'd probably come up and tackle me or something. Whether you're a 20-year veteran or a 4-year veteran, you'd be like, "Are you kidding me? I'm not former Marine." And so there's this deep identification with yourself, with your service. And so to have that betrayal, that institutional betrayal, by the people that you must say yes sir or yes ma'am to every morning and salute sharply, or yes NCO, no NCO, whatever, depending on who's reprising or retaliating against you. It really freaking sucks, and it hurts. And so what we at the foundation provide is help with navigating the systems that exist within the military, within the DoD DHS to try to fight back against that. We lobbied Congress quite a bit to change laws and to actually try to hold people accountable. And we also, I think, when people ask me, what do I enjoy what I do? I think the most important service that I provide to any person that I speak with is to make them feel less isolated. Because part of the reprisal and retaliation is this really, really well done gaslighting, and you believe that you're the one that's crazy. And so to have someone say to you, yeah, that makes sense, your command is letting you down and they're betraying you. It turns the light bulb off in your head or on in your head. You're like, oh yeah, you're supposed to do that nonsense, aren't they? Why aren't they doing that? And you're kind of like, huh, okay. And so it makes you feel less, it helps people feel less isolated. So I think that's what you wanted me to ramble on about. Do you want me to ramble on anymore?
So when you said that the betrayal to your service betrays you, so if you're a Marine and now you feel like you're on the outside of the Marine Corps, I think we can all kind of empathize with that, because as a social worker, as an attorney, as an engineer, if you feel like you're the outside of your profession, it doesn't, I think it's whatever you're identifying with, your identity, and when you feel pushed out, I think that is institutional betrayal, no matter where you work.
I absolutely agreed. And if you could bear with me for 1 second, on my worst day, I was raised a little schizophrenic. I was raised Christian and Hindu. It makes sense in my mind. Anyways, so on my worst day in June of 23, I just randomly opened up my cadet Bible from West Point, because I just keep on to things because I like it. Randomly opened up to Psalm 142, so I'll just read it, super short. And it was just so perfect for the day. I cry out loudly to God. Loudly I plead with God for mercy. I spill out all my complaints beforehand and spell out my troubles in detail. As I sink in despair, my spirit ebbing away, you know how I'm feeling. Know the danger I'm in, the traps hidden in my path. Look right, look left. There's not a soul who cares what happens. I'm up against the wall with no exit. It's just me, all alone. I cry out, God, call out. You are my last chance, my only hope for life. Well, listen, please listen. I've never been this low. Rescue me from those who are hunting me down. I'm no match for them. Get me out of this dungeon so I can thank you in public. Your people will form a circle around me, and you'll bring me showers of blessing. So that was just like so perfect to open my little West Point Cadet Bible and just randomly open it up, and that was what was put in front of me. And it was actually that afternoon that I spoke with for the first time Ryan Swayze, who's the founder and president of Walk Talk Foundation. And that moment, plus that conversation with Ryan, was the thing that turned me around, made me feel less isolated, and realized that my command was betraying me. And here I am, having a great life. Pretty awesome. Oh, thank you. No, I didn't. Actually, I was telling the gentleman over there, my last gig before I left DC last time, I was the aide de camp to the director of DIA. So I was compelled to buy a wardrobe. And it was really great not having a husband, because I was able to spend about 10 grand on clothes, about $7 on jewelry. It was kind of glorious. Thank God not being married. Thank God nobody's watching my money but me.
Okay, what would you like me to say? Okay, so I met Jackie early in my whistleblowing journey, and when I realized she was a social worker, we hit it off because it was like not having to explain the lingo, not having to explain how hard it was to be a whistleblower. And she's been instrumental on my journey to help me find attorneys and get me to this space. And I've known her since 2018, and we started talking a lot about how this impacted families, as parents specifically of young children, and how our kids don't have a choice. They're really the only ones in the journey that don't have a choice. And so when we talk about how powerful the peer connection is, not having to recreate the world, not having to dig for something on your own. I remember calling her up saying, hey, somebody who threatened to kill me in my past career is now stalking me. What do I do? And she's like, okay, we're gonna save some time together. And I didn't have to really think about it because I had a counterpart who believed me and was willing to help me find the resources because they were deeper into their journey. And that's kind of what hooked me was, okay, I really believe in this format. I think peer connection is essential. And as we've kind of been the little engine that could and made it here today, we've been trying to spread it out a little bit and talk about family. My mother's here, my daughter's here. You saw the teenagers that were here. And recognizing that children of whistleblowers go through something really unique. And to know they're not alone is really powerful. So we've been doing the peer connection as best we can with people who are volunteering with us. And we've started deeper conversations around mental health and whistleblowers and how to make sure that they're safe and stable to even get to the point of litigation. And when you're experiencing that moral injury, recognizing that at least you weren't part of the immoral act and that you have a chance to heal. And so working with individuals kind of on the long-term impact of this trauma, the identity disruption, the impact to the stability and safety of your family. And I know, right? Stop it. So we're excited to be here, and we're so glad that like our little engine that could keeps on growing. And we're going to continue to have discussions about how to support whistleblowers in this space. How do you remain stable even through stand as you're testifying? How do you make sure that you vet your attorneys, that you use your voice to continue to protect the community that you set out to protect? Because I think sometimes once you've lost your job, people become really hyper-focused on litigation. It's such a small fraction of who you are in this world, and you can continue to work to protect the community that caused you to lose your job. And I think that was what kept me stable, is focusing on legislative changes that allowed me to continue my work to protect the children in the district, even though I couldn't do it as well. That's not any longer. And so a lot of strategy with Jackie, a lot of strategy with Gab, a lot of strategy with Doug on talking about how do I do two things at once and make sure to toggle them together. And it's been 7.5 years and my appeals just appealed with me. So we're on another journey together, but I think I couldn't have done it without Jackie. And I think it's so important that we keep this network going and we all learn from each other and come from it with a very humble place. And recognizing just because we're in pain sometimes doesn't mean we can create pain for others, but we can work on moving together. And so I'm so glad that you guys are all. I don't know what else I'm supposed to say though. Okay, so
So I'm not a whistleblower per se. I appreciate the invitation to be here with you all today. I am Mildred Mohammed. I am an award-winning global keynote speaker on the issues of domestic abuse and violence, child custody, PTSD, and suicide. Most of you, I'm sure, remember back in 2002, there was a boy and a man in the DC area that was killing people randomly. Mohammed, well, I am Mildred Mohammed, and I was the intended target. And so law enforcement did not tell the public that I was the intended target. And so for 10 years, I've been sharing my story, and it's 10 years later after the incident that law enforcement is informing the public that the reason he came to this area was to find me, which he did, started shooting people around me. I was supposed to be number 15. Two more people were supposed to be killed after me. And the primary reason was he wanted to kill me so that he can get custody of our children. So it was a domestic violence, child custody issue. And so Jackie wanted me to speak on, which I met Jackie at the IBAC conference in California, and she wanted me to come and speak. So it was an adversity in the public eye, going through adversity in the public eye. The first thing that I did was to get a Google phone number because they have to announce who they are before you can talk to them. Media training was something that I had to learn on my own. I didn't have an advocate. Actually, I had no one. I had to navigate the judicial system on my own. I got my divorce myself, custody of my children myself. Unfortunately, there are many people who were afraid to be around me for fear that they would be shot, even though he was in prison. It was difficult for me to get employment, so I went to the library, got a book on how to become a public speaker, and that's what I did. I couldn't find counseling for me and my children because that was a high-profile case, and many people wanted to be famous using our story. So I went to the library, got a book on counseling, and learned how to counsel me and my children myself. Because I figure if anybody's gonna mess them up, it will be me. So we navigated through that system. The media was atrocious. The community blamed me. Once they found out I was in the area, they said if I would have stayed with him, then he just would have killed me. If I would have stayed on the West Coast, then the people on the East Coast would still be alive. How dare I call me and my children victims when none of us were hurt or killed? And how dare I bring this drama into this quiet community? So it didn't matter what I did or what I said. It was all my fault. I told my children, I said, what we're not going to do is take on the opinions of others. We're going to learn to quiet the voices because everyone is entitled to their opinion. It doesn't mean that we have to accept it or internalize it because we have to find a way to make it anyway. I told my children that you cannot use your dad as an excuse for failure. You're not going to come to me and say, my dad was the DC sniper and I can't make it. I said, you got to bring me something better than that. So my son is 34, he's married. He works at Sunglass Hut. He's the manager. Both of my daughters sing classical music in 8 different languages, and they both work at NASA. Of course, I'm a speaker. And what I would like to say to you as whistleblowers, I'm very proud of you all for taking a stand and doing what you feel is right, because it's very difficult in this world where things are flipped around, where what's right is wrong and what's wrong is right. And I just applaud all of you on how you come across, because as a survivor of domestic violence, we're kind of like whistleblowers too, because we're trying to get someone to listen to this, because this person is abusing us, but they don't want to listen. The police didn't listen to me when I was trying to get them to understand this man is trying to kill me. He said, you have become my enemy, and as my enemy, I will kill you. So going to them with that, there wasn't enough. I went to the governor in Washington State. I came over to this area because my mom was sick. I was living in a shelter. He had already kidnapped the children, emptied the bank accounts. So I came over here to help my mom. I called the FBI and told them they wanted to put me in the middle of a parking lot and use me as a decoy in order to lure him out. 18 months later is when I get my children back. So I stood on what I believe. I now help other victims and survivors of domestic violence. I've helped over 200 women to receive restraining orders, which is difficult to get because they pulled out the advocates in the court, and if you don't know the terminology to get a restraining order, you won't get it. It's very important to learn the law, and even in whistleblowing, what you're doing, because if you don't know the law, you're lost. If you don't know the terminology that is needed in order to get your case passed, it's not going to happen. They continue to kick it back, or they just dismiss your case. It's important to understand that even when you're going through it, other people are watching you, because in watching you, they gain the strength and the inspiration in order to continue to do what they need to do for themselves. I'd like to offer a resource when you find yourself unemployed or you're trying to fight your case. You still got to eat, you still got to put gas in your car, you still have to do these day-to-day things. Findhelp.com, put your zip code in that, and you will find all of the resources you need, from housing assistance to food, to gas in your car, education, it doesn't matter. If you find that while you are in your relationship and it starts to get abusive, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. Every relationship doesn't make it through this process. It's a long, tedious process. People get anxious, they get scared, and in that fear, they may lash out in ways that you never thought this person would do. So it's important to continue to protect yourself. If you find that you cannot talk to anybody about what you're going through, because a lot of people won't understand how you feel, journal. Get a book, a journal, go to Walmart, just get the ones with no writing in it. In the top left corner, you put the date. In the top right corner, you put the time. And you open the journal with something positive, like peace be unto you, or anything that's positive to you. And then you write how you feel that day. Don't write about other people, write about your emotions. In doing this, you are tapping into that particular emotion that you may have been afraid to tell someone else. And by getting it out, you open up another door where other emotions will come up, and you'll be able to analyze them and move on from them. When you find that you're isolated or alone, just understand, in that isolation is growth. In that isolation, you really get to understand who you are and how you choose to fight, because it is a fight until you get the resolution that you're seeking. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, and you remind me that we have had cases where the domestic violence issues filter into the workplace. I just had a case recently where this woman said that she had brought her order of protection into the workplace, and instead of sort of working with her on how to create a security plan for her for at work, they just fired her. They were like, well, if he's dangerous, then you're dangerous to us. And so now her whole case is about, they fired her because she had this protective order. What could you say about maybe some of the advice or things we could do to help people navigate that? Because I don't know that there's enough information about what to do when the protective order is brought into the workplace and the employee says, help me.
Well, that's where it gets tricky, because when the employee knows the environment of the office, most times they don't say anything. They just keep the restraining order on them in case something happens, the police show up, that they can show up to them. The purpose of keeping it on you is, if your abuser finds you, you call the police and you can show them the restraining order, and then that person will be arrested. Again, 80% of victims do not share with their employer that they are victims for fear of being fired, which is why I gave the other resource of findhelp.com. I have my books back to, in case anybody wants to order them, but I also have a book called Teleworking While Being Abused. If you are teleworking, a few things you can do is make sure that you turn on your camera to show us a live picture. Keep your microphone on so that your coworkers, if they hear something, they can call the police and ask for a welfare check. The employer has a duty. They really do have a responsibility to those who are victimized in their office. And they are supposed to have a plan. Workplace violence is real. And they're supposed to have a plan. But once it starts to affect the bottom line, then that's when they're going to get rid of it. Because they don't have the patience, nor do they have the resources to continue to keep you on, even though you may be valuable to the company. It's just more feasible for them to get rid of you and just start all over with someone else. So it's important to have the restraining order. It's also important to have an advocate if they can, so that the advocate can help with that process and giving them what they need.
Does anybody else have any questions for this panel?
Yeah.
And your story about protection in the workplace reminded me of a famous Canadian case that had to do with a nurse and a doctor, and there were a couple of other cases, but not quite as bad as this one. And I wonder, it occurred to me as I listened to you and as I remembered this case, where the hospital knew about the restraining order, but the problem was that the doctor and the nurse worked in the same hospital. So, you know, how to keep them apart. So they tried to work it so that the nurse worked on different hours, different days from when the doctor was there. Only thing was that they didn't follow the rules, right? As human beings, somebody didn't know what was supposed to happen, so he sneaked in on the weekend, and as she came off shift, he stabbed her and killed her. And the other case was simply a question. Well, to my mind, it was, and I wondered what you think about this. Sometimes organizations and people in them just don't know what to do, you know, how to deal with these situations. I mean, if they thought about it, and I think that this went on in the hospital for some time before, like she had reported, you know, that she was being threatened by him many, many times before she got the restraining order. And, you know, I attended a conference once where they discussed this whole case. It was a center of discussion. And, you know, one of the solutions was, well, so this won't happen again. What you have to do is report, report, report. Well, the problem was she did report, but they didn't seem to be capable of figuring out what to do. So I just wondered if that was a thought that might have occurred to you as well.
Yes, ma'am. So everybody knows what to do who works in domestic violence. It's just people get tired. They don't want to put forth the energy anymore. When I was in a shelter, I told them that I didn't go outside. I stayed in the middle of the house. I was in a shelter for 8 months. Had to change my name, had to wear a disguise, the whole nine, right? So they told me I had to go to the social services office and I had to catch the bus. I'm not catching a bus. He's going to be on top of a roof and he's going to shoot me. They didn't believe me and I didn't go. So they get tired. In terms of report, she did report, as you said, many times. The hospital became lax. The most dangerous person in the world is someone who has nothing to lose. He had already given up on his ability to continue to practice medicine. He didn't care as long as she wasn't alive. And then he would be able to live his life the way he wanted to. If I can't have you, can't anybody have you? That's the mentality of an abuser. So since he killed her, then he was happy. He probably just lay down or just, here I am, come and arrest me, because his mission was accomplished. People get tired of victims and whistleblowers constantly asking for help, constantly saying the same thing, constantly trying to get you to understand the very details of what it is that's important to me and how this is affecting my life and the life of my family. They get tired and then they push you aside, and then they come up with all of these other excuses so that they can delay the process that they already know you are owed. So instead of just giving you what you need, they would rather just have it continue until you die or until something else happens. That's the process. It's not giving you the relief that you need. That's the purpose of not putting people in place for victims to write a restraining order, is because I'm tired of you telling us this all the time. He's not going to kill you. You're just making this up. You're just being emotional. You don't have the mentality in order to understand that this man is not going to kill you. I heard all of that. So if you don't take your own safety, your own case in your own hands and fight for yourself, nothing will happen. So everybody knows what to do. Everybody just don't want to do it. Is there another question?
Yeah. So I'm also mindful that the malignant narcissist that tends to be the perpetrator of domestic violence also gets up in the morning and goes to work. And that same perpetrator that is the psychopath next door is also the employee in the next cubicle, potentially your boss, your coworker, and anybody else who would engage in things like gaslighting and mobbing and marginalizing, shunning, ostracizing, double binding, and counter-accusing. Those are the toxic tactic domains in my book that I talk about a lot. I'm not doing it today. But when we see these tactics, we know that, I'm going to come back over here before Paul looks up and tells me I'm not in front of my camera. We know that these toxic tactics are things that lead to abuse. And whether it's abuse at home or at work, domestic violence, violence in the workplace, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, it is all trauma.
And just because the person is happy and nice doesn't mean they're not abused. Doesn't mean they're not narcissistic. No, that's the build up to get you to relax your boundaries so that they can continue to attack.
Yeah, that's a characteristic of a narcissist, is everybody thinks they're charming.
Well, in my story is a little bit different because as a whistleblower in public energy, very early on, I had a conversation with HR, and they would tell me what a great guy I was, that I'd wait in the Navy, blah, blah, blah. And then sort of was, don't fuck with us, you know. Okay, so I mean, I can't, but my first full-time job as an engineer was to play an active on the deaths of 20 million people on a nuclear submarine. I said, that's not why I was willing to kill 20 million people to hear I'm supposed to look the other way at things that might be killing people in the Department of Energy. So here we are 30 years later. But what I haven't heard, not only here but elsewhere, is the role of religious faith and faith communities. There's a lot of whistleblowers, and motivations are in part faith-based, with the reason that they resist the reprisal are in part faith-based. So I prevailed 8 times as a whistleblower, 8 times, okay? It was fine. It was repeated. I had done my duty to protect others, and the employer at the Department of Energy had engaged in process. I went to my faith community and said, will you please go on record in criticism of this established, final, repeated record of law breaking? You know what I was told? You're being selfish to even ask. Now that was my road to Damascus moment where I could understand slavery, Jim Crow, tobacco farming, on and on. It's all about the, you know, and their rationale was, if we do something like that, some of the people will leave the pews and they won't go to heaven, but they won't put money in the plate either, which is the real bottom line. So I felt more betrayed by that than I did by DOE, which had warned me early on what it was going to do. And I'm kind of sharing that because I think these faith communities could play a role in supporting whistleblowers that they're not doing and not being called out about.
Yeah, we have actually had this conversation about how to involve faith-based or spirituality in this space as well, because we definitely believe that there is a need to bring all these resources and all these tools that help people be resilient, to also bring them comfort to heal. And I'm walking back here because I do see your hand is up.
Thank you so much. Just two quick things to offer. Really love the panel discussion, and thank you so much for being here. I'm a VP of HR for a California-based company where there actually are state protections around domestic violence. And something that folks may not realize is that if you work for the benefit of a California employer, sometimes you may get additional coverage for things outside of that state. But I also spend a lot of time looking at executive abuse in the private sector. I've also worked in the federal government too, but narcissists in particular love the top job. They gravitate to the top job. There's a lot more studies out now showing that they tend to occupy these seats, and they're really kind of protected by, boards and other groups that are kind of wrapped around them. But I think it's also really important to note that there's really no cure for narcissism. And so what we tend to see in the private sector is if you file a complaint against someone that's really powerful in those spots is executive coaching or trying to talk to them about things that can do a lot more damage. So I'm just really glad you guys are having this conversation and just wanted to throw that out.
In terms of how to retaliate against a narcissist.
No comments.
You have to get a journal and write every day what happened. Only give details. Do not include emotions. In a court, emotions is fluff, and you will not get the judgment. You have to state the facts, just like Judge Judy says. Just give me the facts. So you write down the facts, but you do in a chronological order, the date and the time, what happened. If you can get someone, which you probably won't, to write an affidavit or write something about what they witnessed, that would help. However, if you can't, date and time. Once you get about 3 months, because it's going to take 3 months of documentation before a judge will grant anything you need in your favor, because you need to show a pattern that this person is doing to you at work and even at home. 3 months, continuous reporting, just the facts. He or she did not give me the promotion because, and if you write the facts, what was it in your responsibilities at work that you did not fulfill that this person is using against you? If you find that you are doing those things and this person is just writing a negative report, and that's something you need to write down, date and time. Even if you spoke to them about it, you need to write down as soon as possible what that communication was at the time, so that you can have that when you go report. If you're having abusive issues at home, gotta write the date and the time, what was said, how it was said, only the facts, never fluff. He made me feel, she made me feel, means nothing in a court of law. It's only the facts.
And just a little thing on religion. What I find as a therapist presently, working within someone's belief system or their moral code and being very clear to keep yours and allowing somebody to navigate in your belief system is huge in stabilizing a person, because it can help them find the answers they already believe and have been invested in rather than trying to replace those. And so it makes it so much easier to say, for instance, if I deal with grief clients all the time, if someone you have loved just passed and you're grieving them, it's okay to grieve them. But if you truly honestly believe, say for instance, Christian, that you're going to heaven then they're no longer in pain, and you should be able to celebrate that truth. It's okay to grieve it, but don't grieve as if they're presently in pain, because your belief system allows you to believe they're with God, they're with their relatives, and you let them develop a storyline around that within their own religious or cultural belief system. And it takes being self-aware enough to set your own beliefs down and acknowledge that you don't have to force your beliefs on someone else, because this is their moment that they're processing something really deep and traumatic, especially with whistleblowers. But that's just my 2 cents on that, because I do believe the religious space plays a big role for many people, but also cultural communities, and your support system looks different for everyone. And so finding a way to embrace it while supporting those communities. And that's in part why we started the family and the teens version of the peer network, was we needed to be able to share information and support our community and recognize differences, but also embrace them.
2, 3 of the first people when you're in trouble that you go to is friends, family, and religious institution. What is your expectation when you go to these people? What are you looking for them to say or for them to do to help you? If you're going to these people, have no expectation, just allow them to speak to you in a way that they feel they need to, because everybody doesn't know what to say to you. Everybody doesn't know how to appeal to your belief system. They don't. Even the ones that are in it don't, because like you said, it's the bottom line. So in domestic violence, they don't preach about domestic violence in church. They're not going to preach about those vices that will cause people to not give their money. They're just not going to do that. And even if you go to them in private, it's still going to be, well, you know, they're going to quote something from the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah that will benefit them and not you. Because it's all about making sure you have your emotions intact once you're done talking to them, where you can say, okay, hey, I'm $1,000 because you just helped me. It's always that. When it starts to affect the bottom line, they will not help you to process what is going on. You have to go and seek someone else that will help you through that process, or a journal.
And what about the nuclear weapon material? That's at the bottom of it. It's not just about me, it's about
Right,
nuclear
because-
weapons. That's
and-
my point.
And so they don't you have an amazing mind with the nuclear weapon. I'm just gonna say that. Okay. Everybody is not gonna be up here. We're here. So when you talking, so the eagles don't have the same terminology as the chickens, right? You're on an eagle level. We're down here with the chickens looking up at you saying, wow, flying up there with all of that. Everybody's not going to relate to you. It's not. I mean, nuclear weapons, come on. Half of us don't even know what all that stuff means. We look into you like, wow, that's amazing. You know what? You can break that down to the least common denominator and still know what you're talking about? No. So it is, what is your expectation when you go and speak to people that you feel is in a position of authority that they can help you? If they don't have that, you're wasting your time. They can't provide that. They cannot do it. They're just looking at you like this.
Black and white engineers, so I quote the Bible, I quote the Greene, I quote this and this. They're all supposed to do something, and then you say no.
They can't.
I understand what you're
Okay,
saying. but
yeah.
I'm
Your
just trying to-
expectation is up there with the eagles, and you're talking to people, and you're talking to chickens. It's not the same, not on the same level.
So one of the things that I wanted to give a name to is when she was talking, people get tired. It's essentially what we call compassion fatigue or secondary trauma. And we have to recognize that this is like throwing, as my mother would say, a rock into a pond and seeing the ripple effect around the community. Is that people get tired. They get tired of being compassionate. They get tired of a problem with no answer. And so we have to remember to embrace those individuals and also give them a break, because we're so deep in it, we forget to do that. But that's also when we call our peer support and say, hey, I just need to scream for a second because no one's understanding this. And they can say, okay, now you're done with that. So let's move on to what your action steps are. Right? Because you have to have reasonable expectations in order to move forward, and you can't get stuck in the pain. And it's super easy to get stuck in the pain. And sometimes when we're in pain, we feel like it's okay to make other people be in pain. So we have to stop that cycle and recognize that we have a duty to heal and be held accountable to the same level we're asking other people. And part of that is saying, okay, how do I work on my own behavior? How do I move forward rather than stay in this very stuck place? And so we use that as a growth spot in the peer network. And I'm just excited to see that.
So I was reading recently a book called Emotional Rape Syndrome. And in the book, the author, Michael Fox, Dr. Fox, talks about some of this that I think we're kind of touching on when he says that violence, physical violence may kill you physically, kills the body. Abuse kills the soul. And I think it's a recognition then that when we're going through some of these things, like when you were talking about grief, we kind of have an understanding and a construct for grief. We know that when people die, when you lose someone you love, you're going to grieve. And there's an expectation of that grief. And you sort of recognize it and accept it, and other people around you recognize and accept that if you've lost your mother or your spouse or worse, a child, that grief makes sense. But with moral injury, identity disruption, soul death, when you are the walking dead, when you are the person who has been so tormented and tortured emotionally, and you're not the same person you were, it's hard to know how to grieve that, and it's hard to know how to ask for help with that grief. And I do feel like it's that soul death where our morality and our spirituality may be intertwined a little bit, that it makes it hard to feel like my faith hasn't let me down. You know, it's that when bad things happen to good people, why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? I've been a good person. How am I being so disparaged? Why am I being defamed? Why am I the one losing my job? Why do I see perpetrators getting promoted? It's that questioning, I think, and it's that constant feeling negated as a human being, where so much of what happens in retaliation mirrors some of the things we see with domestic violence, but also mirrors some of the same things that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross described in the death and dying process. You know, the denial, oh, they couldn't possibly be this bad. Why is this happening to me? Well, if only I do this, then maybe it'll stop, or I'll only go so far in my case. And then finally, so what is acceptance or settlement? Like, how do you come up to a place where you can let it go and feel restored? Even though I think one of the attorneys said today, it might not be what you want, but it has to be what you accept and where you feel like you can move on from, because you can't live in the past. You have to think about how you're moving forward. And I think that is a place sometimes that takes us to go through a little spiritual growth, emotional growth, and a rebuilding of our lives and our identities.
So you know what's awesome about being the president? I mean, it's kind of amazing, actually, if you think about it. not going to go so far as to say getting abused, domestic violence. The really awesome thing about getting reprised against and abused in that sense, in a professional sense, not a personal sense per se, is you know the truth. So that one of my very favorite books is The Consolation of Philosophy, is written by a gentleman in 1325, I think, 13 or something. Kind of a difficult time in Europe history, we'll say. And he had been one of the advisors to the king, and the king was overthrown. The new guy came in with a phenomenal name, Ulrich. If I had ever had a kid, he would have been named Ulrich. Such an awesome name. And for a little while, he's Ulrich's advisor, and Ulrich thinks he's great. But then after a while, Ulrich realizes that Boethius is potentially slightly more intelligent than he is, and decides to execute him. So Boethius is in the tower of whatever, waiting to be executed. And he writes this book in the style of the day where you're having a dialogue with different, philosophy, different gods of philosophy or war or whatever. And so he was specifically in the style of the book, he wrote it in as the Consolation of Philosophy. So it was a dialogue between him and philosophia. And one of the fantastic conclusions that the book reaches, that Boethius reaches, is that it's only when you're at your worst, at your absolute lowest, when you're in the tower and Ulrich is about to take your head off, which he did, that you know who your friends are, that you know what the truth is. There's, if you ever read Marcus Aurelius, he talks about how all of the old Roman emperors always had a statue of Lady Fortuna in their bedroom, as a reminder that fortune works in this wheel. There's a fantastic Italian mosaic of it, where you have God on top, not God on the bottom, and people are on this wheel, and on one side, I'll do it opposite so you can get my drift. So one side they're coming down and they're holding on for dear life, and you can tell their faces are just like, oh God, it's gonna suck. And they're going down, and then there's people on the other side of the wheel who are coming back up, and they're holding on, and they've got these smiles on their faces, and everything's wonderful, and they're wealthy, and they're powerful, and everything's great. But the wheel's gonna go back around again, and you're gonna be going like, oh God, I got it. And when you're wealthy, when you're powerful, when you're successful, when you're happy, everyone wants to be around you, the life of the party, it's just great. And then you lose everything, and you're on the downward spiral of that wheel of fortune, and you're going into the flames, and all these fair weather friends are gone. But you will, if you're lucky, you will either have a few people that are there still with you, and so that's the truth of who should actually be in your life, or you'll have no one with you. And that's also a truth. And you'll know that, okay, all the people that I was investing my very, very limited time in, that I'm given in this very, very short life, they're worthless. And so I need to figure out how to find some better friends, or some better family, or a better church, or whatever the heck it is, or mosque, anything, whatever, right? And so it's actually, that's really cool. That is the most wonderful thing about being reprised against, about being abused, is you actually know the truth. And there really, truly is, I think, there's no greater gift that I can receive than actually knowing the truth.
So that's a great point. I'm going to go back to the grief really quick. So the 5 stages of grief, that book was really written for people who are dying. But when you live through the grief, so you live, it's much more like a ping pong ball. It's all over the place. It can hit you like it's fresh 10 years from today. And when I work with clients who experience deep grief, whether it's whistleblowing or loss of someone they love, or a personal loss by losing a baby, I often kind of explain it to them like that. But there's a philosophy that I'm kind of working on, because I've worked with a lot of individuals who were raised in communities where there's violence. And in that community violence, they didn't expect to live long. They really only plan until their mid-20s. And so the philosophy is kind of like, how do you plan past death until you live? And I really see that with whistleblowers. There is a piece where it's like, I can't plan any further than this. And they forget they're still alive. And we have a duty to plan past that moment and work on our healing, right? Because being here is a gift. And we all have the responsibility to show up for ourselves and people around us. And so planning past that, right? Especially when this is just a piece of a large puzzle. And you live within your morals, right? And so you get to walk away saying, I lived in my moral code, and so I don't have to heal from an immoral act. And that's my gift at this moment, right?
Anybody else?
So as for victims of domestic violence, survivors of domestic violence, the point of living or planning is too overwhelming ahead. And so we have to go moment by moment, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. And once you go past the day, then you know that the next day is going to be, there will be challenges, but you have the day prior to build upon in order to get through the next day. Because that was one of the difficult things for me. Yes, my children are gone, he's emptied the bank accounts, and now what am I going to do? I had to go moment by moment, minute by minute was too much. Moment by moment, I made it through every moment of this day. I can make it through every minute of the next day. I can make it through every hour of the next day. Don't overwhelm yourself trying to do things. Move at your pace. It's important for you to know your pace and not compare yourself to someone else's pace, because we're all on our own journey trying to get to where we need to be in order to get the solutions that we're looking for. Looking at somebody else, but she's doing much better than me, but you don't know where she went. Concentrate on you, and concentrating on you and how you process information, how it affects you mentally, how it affects your perspective on life in general, will bring you to a resolution that, you know what, I can do this. It's going to take time, and that's okay. Don't put a time on, okay, well, next year is going to be that. You will be sorely disappointed when that year comes around and you're not where you are. Just go day by day in your process and not look at someone else's process.
I like to say I have a duty to get this woman from today into tomorrow. And sometimes that's all I'm about.
All right, ladies, thank you. I think this was a really good way to start wrapping up our day. It's been, I think, a really good bunch of sessions and panels and discussions. I think we've really explored a lot today, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow when we'll talk more about the emotional healing. Dr. Gray will be back to lead us through some interesting energy psychology and healing sessions that I think will be really important to learn some of these skills as well. I'm going to give us a bit of a stretch break, an opportunity to clean up a little bit. We're going to do our walk to the White House. I think we've explained this a little bit earlier, and I know we've made some reference to it. The Senator Grassley video earlier talked about how he's written to every president since Reagan and has asked for a Rose Garden ceremony to celebrate whistleblowers. He hasn't done that, or no president has done that. That's why he makes space for us at the Capitol. He invites us to where he can invite us to. That's why we go to the Capitol. We have those meetings and those sessions. It's why the U.S. Defense Department has sent us its multi-service color guard team today, as well as the Navy band, because we honor those selfless sacrifices of whistleblowers. But until we actually get an invitation into the front door of the White House, we're going to go over and knock, and we're going to do our own little ceremony. we'll bring our own roses because who needs theirs? And we've got actually, I think, prettier ones that were cultivated, hand painted, handmade. They're beautiful. I think you've seen them on display. We're gonna wait for the kids to come back because I don't know if they're back yet. Okay, so we're gonna wait for the kids to come back. They've made us a banner for this year. We're gonna walk to the White House. It's only 3 blocks away. We're gonna open up our banner. I'll read the letter from Senator Grassley. And we're gonna give you flowers to carry, your own roses. And then when we get to the fence by the White House, just be mindful, don't touch the fence, don't try to climb over the fence, don't throw anything over the fence. We're there to be respectful of who we are as a community. We're not gonna involve the police in anything that we're doing today. So we're just gonna go over there. We're gonna give out the flowers. We're gonna give each of you an opportunity to make a statement about in whose memory are you planting a flower. You can say your own name, you can recognize somebody else, but we will have our own little ceremony, and then we'll be back here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. What time was it? It's in your program, look it up. 8 o'clock. We have handouts here as well. The team from Mahari and Scallop has left some pamphlets. I've got some magazines. Oh, and there's swag in the other room for you guys to take. The only thing we're selling are the little giraffes for the Giraffe Conservation Foundation to help us keep our mascot from extinction. So if you wouldn't mind going over there, getting a giraffe, if you don't have cash to give to